Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad that for those of you who are joined us in person, and then we have Regents on the Zoom as well. So thank you for all enjoying this special meeting of the University of Minnesota Board of Regents. There are people joining us both in the boardroom here, and we welcome those two who are joining us by live stream. Also, I wanted to make a special welcome to our new regents, here around the horseshoe for the first time for this special meeting. We're very glad to have your service to this wonderful university, so thank you very much. Today we have one item, and it's the President's recommended 6-year capital plan and the 2026 state capital request review. That's the only item on the agenda today. And let me welcome President Cunningham and Vice President Alice Roberts Davis. And joining us by Zoom is Executive Vice President Goldman. President Cunningham, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Wheeler. Since joining the university, I've been struck by both the extraordinary scale of our physical assets and the immense responsibility that comes with caring for them. These facilities, made possible by state investment, tuition dollars, and donor support, are not only central to our mission today, but also to the success of generation of students and researchers to come. We have said before, and I want to emphasize again, that the traditional ways of maintaining and modernizing these assets are no longer sustainable. We cannot rely solely on unpredictable state funding cycles or short-term fixes. Instead, we must take a forward-looking approach that ensures our buildings and infrastructures are safe, reliable, and adaptable to the needs of our academic enterprise, and to move more of that into the management of our own budget process, recognizing that there simply is more to be done than we are going to be able to get done with state funds that are limited and dwindling. Today's presentation outlines our strategy to position the university to invest wisely, plan responsibly, and sustain these spaces that make our mission possible. And with that, with great pleasure, I'll turn it over to Executive Vice President Greg Goldman, whose leadership on this thinking has really changed the course of where we would like to go compared to how this has been managed in the past. Vice President Goldman.
Great. Thank you, President Cunningham, Vice Chair Wheeler, and Regents. I'd like to take a few minutes to provide some context for the topic for review and for discussion today. To set the stage, it's helpful to remember that in 2025 legislative session, the university requested $200 million in HEAPR funding and $20 million in project funds. What was ultimately passed was a $700 million statewide capital package, with the university receiving $60 million for HEAPR. In addition, $8 million for the Washington Avenue pedestrian bridge that was included in the transportation bill. Over the last several years, the university has averaged only about $47 million annually in state capital investment. The funding level is grossly insignificant to meet our ongoing renewal needs, much less than our programmatic aspirations. Next slide, please. Even more challenging is the unpredictability and irregular of this funding makes it nearly impossible to plan responsibly. As you can see from this chart, the funding has been sporadic over the years. We cannot defer basic safety infrastructure or modernization that needed year after year while waiting to see if the legislative session might do more. As a system, our facility condition assessment shows a staggering $6 billion in deferred maintenance needs. We have a growing number of buildings across every part of our campuses in poor or critical condition. Meanwhile, construction costs continue to rise and our buildings continue to deteriorate. This funding is simply not sustainable, not predictable, and not the viable path for a world-class land grant institution like ours. Next slide, please. Thank you. Given the history of our irregular funding, we had no choice but to take a creative, solution-based approach to ultimately define our own destiny. With this new plan, starting in fiscal year 26, we are setting aside $10 million in recurring O&M funds, which will give us the ability to borrow approximately $150 million that will be paid back over the next 30 years. We'll repeat this cycle every 2 years through 2034, providing us with $750 million to invest back into the most critical facility issues that we have ahead of us. This fund will allow us to rebuild a capital pipeline with purpose and predictability. It will enable us to plan and to address a number of our most significant challenges, not just patch them as we go forward. In the 6-year capital plan, you will see projects that break ground this fiscal year, as well as others that will begin to take shape and lead to transformational change over the next 3 to 6 years. We're incredibly grateful to the Board of Regents support in June, and we look forward to continuing this vital momentum through 2034 as this chart predicts. I'd now like to turn it over to Vice President Alice Roberts-Davis, who will walk you through the details. Alice?
Thank you, Executive Vice President Goldman. Good morning, Vice Chair Wheeler and Regents. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. We are here to present items for review from the President's recommended 2025 6-year capital plan and 2026 state capital request. The 6-year capital plan comes before the board each year and outlines a comprehensive approach to addressing our most pressing capital needs across the system from 2026 through 2031 this year. Additionally, we have the 2026 state capital request, which outlines the submission the university will make to the state for consideration during the 2026 legislative session. The 6-year plan is required by board policy and is a document that sets the direction for major capital projects. This multi-year planning process ensures that we're focusing our limited resources and limited capacity on our highest priority projects. You'll find the plan and the supporting documents for it in your docket materials. The 6-year plan includes 2 components. The first component of the plan is what we intend to ask the state to fund in the next 3 sessions. This is our traditional state capital request, and the first year of that is 2026. You will be asked to approve that next month in your meeting. The second component of the list is university-funded projects that are currently in the early stages of design that we believe will advance to full construction in the next 6 years, and you'll have visibility to those as well. In addition to the actual plan, you'll also see in the docket materials a list of projects that are under consideration. These projects are included to provide transparency on major capital projects that are not quite yet ready to be included in the plan, but work on these continues. Some of these may come to fruition, some of them may not, but it's important that we provide you with a clear picture of all of the projects that are in the pipeline and that may come to you for approval at some point in the future. As projects advance from planning into full design and construction, they come before the board for approval in either the annual capital budget or they come mid-year as a capital budget amendment. There are 2 primary forces that drive the identification of projects and the development of the plan. First are priorities that align with our mission of research and discovery, teaching and learning, and outreach and public service. Here, a new, growing, or changing program requires something new or different in the way of facilities. These are gathered from our chancellors and deans across the system and are prioritized by academic leadership. Equally important are the facility priorities, and in this case, the building itself requires a major investment to continue to meet the needs of the current academic programs. In many cases, both the building and the program require an investment, which is true with the projects that you'll see in this year's plan. In the end, mission and facility needs are balanced against available resources, capital and operating, regulatory requirements, and geographic balance across the system, among other factors that help us prioritize the projects. The plan is built around advancing the priorities outlined in this slide. These planning goals, which have been used for the past several years and previously have been shared with the board, are reflected in the projects we're requesting from the state and in the projects that the university will be funding with its own resources. In October, this board will hear about the strategic imperatives set forth in the university's new strategic plan. Of course, our 6-year plan will evolve to complement that strategic plan and advance these transformative imperatives. So this slide provides the big picture summary of the 6-year capital plan, which is organized into 3 sections. The first section, shown on the left of the slide, lists state capital requests for the next 3 years. HEPR remains a priority for every year since the urgency and need to reinvest in our facilities and infrastructure is so great and it's ongoing. In 2026, we will also request state support for the St. Paul Campus Center, as well as dentistry clinical renovation. I'll go into more detail about those projects shortly. In 2027, we will request state support for the Large Lakes Observatory in Duluth and space consolidation and decommissioning at the Twin Cities campus. The Large Lakes Observatory in Duluth is truly a one-of-a-kind facility dedicated to studying how large lakes function, how they behaved in the past, and how they will respond to environmental changes in the future. The UMD campus is situated among the world's most extensive body of freshwater in the world, and the goal of this project is to replace an obsolete facility with something that fully leverages this unique research opportunity. The Space Consolidation and Decommissioning Project recognizes the fact that we have to continually strive to be good stewards of our space, and by consolidating into less space, we can reduce our footprint, leading to more sustainable campus, both financially and environmentally, as it is less expensive to operate fewer square feet. The Capital Investment Initiative funds that EVP Goldman referenced will help us develop the plans to kickstart the work on these important consolidation initiatives. The next section of the plan are projects that are in development. These projects are in some phase of design and expected to be funded during the next 6 years. You'll note that Capital Investment Initiative funds will contribute full or partial funding for many of these projects. We can't emphasize enough how important and transformative this will be for us for preparing and advancing multi-year plans with predictability and speed, and we're so grateful to the Regents for this funding. The final section lists projects that are under consideration. These have been identified as capital priorities and recommended to complete further assessment in support of decision-making. These projects need more time to develop, but are identified as important enough to continue through our planning process, and we want to ensure that they stay on your radar. You'll note that most of these are plans for buildings that are existing, but I'd be remiss if I didn't call out that we continue to formulate a plan along with the colleges to continue to move forward with feasibility for a new facility for academic health sciences in Duluth. Now we'll shift our focus to the near term in the 2026 state capital request. The plan has changed substantially since we brought it to you for review at the June Regents meeting, so I'll first talk about the changes that you'll see. First, the space consolidation and decommissioning project will move to 2027, as I just mentioned. We'll use the additional time to define project specifics, which we can do with 6 to 12 months and relatively small amounts of the Capital Investment Initiative funding to support the pre-design work. Next, the Biomanufacturing Innovation Lab project plan and timeline has unfortunately been impacted by changes to the federal research funding landscape. Although the project remains a priority, we'll benefit from a little bit more time and more clarity around the future of federal grant funding in order to build the right financial plan and program fit for that building. Last, as I mentioned, academic health sciences in Duluth also needs more time for discussion between the players and the stakeholders within the university and outside, and we plan to bring it forward in the future. The revised proposal includes 2 new, timely, and exciting projects in addition to HEPR. First, the St. Paul Campus Center. It was first introduced to the board as part of the 2022 6-year plan. We have since completed the work necessary to define the project scope and budget, and the St. Paul Task Force recommendations, which will be discussed in much detail today as we tour the campus, reinforces the need for this important gathering space and the re-envisioned St. Paul campus. Next, the dentistry clinical renovation will revitalize teaching and practice space for the only dental school in the state of Minnesota, which really does need a refresh. I'll go through more detail for each of our other 3 2026 requests in the next slide. As you know, HEPR has long been our primary source of funding for renewal and an anchor of our state requests since it was first initiated in the 1990s. However, as we've said many times, we cannot rely on the state for timing or amounts of funding. So the Capital Investment Initiative will play a critical role in bringing some of those gaps and bridging those gaps in timing and enable us to be more planful and ultimately complete more projects. As an example of this, we are currently finalizing the plan for a complete renovation of the Food Science Nutrition Building in St. Paul, which we'll see later today, and that will combine $25 million from last year's HEAPR appropriation with an equal amount from the Capital Investment Initiative, and we will be able to do a full program on both the renovation of the building and the programmatic aspects of that program. Instead of facing the project and waiting any number of years to receive adequate funding from the state, we'll do the full project now, which will save us money on mobilization of construction and also the use of the building. We can envision more opportunities like this in the current plan and in coming years, and think projects like Eddy Hall or 10 Church Street. And finally, we also want to discuss the fact that the unsustainable amount of space that we have on the campuses will continue to be an issue for us. So we work to consolidate and remove obsolete buildings as our capital needs will become more manageable if we do that. Our second request will be a new St. Paul Campus Center. This project will build a centrally located St. Paul Campus Center to replace the existing St. Paul Student Center and McGraw Libraries on the St. Paul campus. The new campus center will be a highly visible and welcoming campus destination that supports the daily needs of students, faculty, and staff, and reflects the mission and experience of St. Paul for all of our visitors to campus. The facility will combine student union activities in new meeting and events spaces, study areas, active learning spaces, which we desperately need, retail and recreation spaces, student health services, and a new St. Paul campus library at approximately 98,000 square feet. It will also shift the activity on the campus just slightly to the south, which is really the most recent direction of growth on that campus. Our third and final request will be $100 million from the state for a $150 million project for the School of Dentistry. The dentistry clinical renovation will renovate portions of Moose Tower to advance education and training, again, in the only dental school in the state of Minnesota, where more than 70% of the dentists in the state are trained. The renovated space will also improve upon the patient experience for the more than 90,000 patients that visit Moose Tower each year. The reality is that we're falling behind our Big Ten peers, most of whom have built new state-of-the-art dental teaching and practice facilities within the past decade. Finally, I'll highlight the benefits that come from regular and predictable capital investments. Our buildings each serve a mission-related purpose. Campus grounds, infrastructure, buildings, and facility services are a recruitment and retention tool for our faculty, for our students, for our staff. And the fact is, our K through 12 institutions in Minnesota have done a phenomenal job with their facilities, and students come to the university expecting comparable facilities, but in many cases feel like they're stepping back in time. We should also be able to mimic the facilities that they'll have when they enter their future workplaces, and so it's important that we are able to meet that expectation. Bottom line is, if we want to attract the world's best teachers, scholars, and innovators, we have to provide modern, safe, reliable, and welcoming facilities. And that's what this plan is intended to do. So with that, I will conclude and stand for any questions you may have.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vice President Roberts Davis. I really appreciate the thoroughness of that report. So it's up for, as we know, for review today, and then for action next time we meet in October. So with that, I'll see if there's any questions. Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Wheeler, and thank you for the presentation, everybody. I'm very glad to see that monies are being put toward, hopefully, towards the UMD Large Lake Observatory. I think a lot of folks don't know that UMD is also a sea grant, also besides us being a land grant institution. And I've been told that there are two places on the Great Lakes that do fantastic research on freshwater, and one of them is the University of Minnesota Duluth. And I think that's a really important part of what we do as a university. And I'm very glad, and it looks like you've got, I guess, a quick question. You've got some partnerships there with the city and other private entities, is that correct?
Vice Chair Wheeler, Regent Johnson, that's correct. We continue to work closely monitoring that project. It still does need to get through city entitlements. There is a developer who is working on the project, and we remain very closely tied to that. We're very interested in a particular location for the Large Lakes Observatory location, and so as that evolves, we will continue to stay in lockstep so that we can be a part of that project when it's complete.
Thank you.
Regent Farnsworth.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wheeler, and thank you for the presentation this morning. It's very helpful to see the several years out in terms of our state capital request. I liked some of the refresh of how this is being presented to us. Just reacting to the items on the current revised proposal for the state, or the 2026 state capital request. Just a few notes. I think everyone in this room, I'm sure, and well, I know, considers HEPA very important. And I think it's something at the legislature we continue to have opportunities to break down and make more digestible and understandable for legislators and folks in that community. It can be, of course, those of us here understand it, folks or legislators who have experience in that bonding and capital investment work, but just, doing what we can to make sure that HEPA isn't in the if you know category. And we just, are very clear about for example, we have leaky roofs here. This is what we're looking to work on with that. The second St. Paul Campus Center, I'm really thrilled to see that. I know that's been a long time in the works. I'm looking forward to having that engagement over on the campus today. And I know we're just talking at a high level here today in terms of presenting what these different projects are to the board, but thinking about how to tie that in to enrollment and retention growth narrative. I think that's going to be really important this legislative session. And then sort of similar comment with the dentistry clinical renovation. So that's certainly important. I totally agree, and I'm glad to see that on our plan, and thinking about then how does our presentation narrative and advocacy narrative tie in with the health sciences strategic plan and some of that work. So appreciate the presentation today. Again, like seeing the long-term lens, and maybe we've seen it presented this way in the past, but it doesn't. No. Well, I'm glad, I know I can miss things sometimes. So I kind of want to put that out there, disclaimer out there. But this feels, now knowing that for sure, this feels better to me from a long-term strategy lens, and that also that clearly, we can and will adapt, for instance, moving from the preliminary proposal to the revised proposal from June to September. So thanks for this, and looking forward to continued conversations. Thank you, Vice Chair Wheeler.
President Cunningham.
Yeah, thank you, Regent Farnsworth. So a couple things, right, for those folks that have been on the board for a while, this is a completely different way about thinking about our capital requests and planning than has been done before. One, in the recognition, and it's hard for me to overstate, because when I first actually, sat in these meetings last year, I too was perplexed in trying to sit down with Vice President Roberts and her team. They had no ability to tell me and to create a multiple year plan that had any practicality to it, because it was completely reliant on state funds, which, as you saw, have been unpredictable. And one can't plan with the amount of capital square foot we have. You have to plan 2, 3, 4, 5 years out for exactly what's going to be happening during that time. You have to have some predictability of budget line in order to say, I'm going to take down this building, then I'm going to focus on this building, and focus on this building. And so by setting aside the $10 million in our very difficult budget that we passed this past year, that allows $150 million of funds that are a reliable source year over year for capital planning, in addition to asking for the HEPA funds. So it's an entirely different way of looking at things. I'll remind folks, as we look at these projects, which are wonderful, this wonderfulness is a result of a difficult budget decision where we had to find $10 million on our regular budget in our O&M. And to find that money, that impacts decisions we also want to make around compensation and scope reduction and tuition, right? But in order to have buildings that support a future university, those are the budget decisions that got made in June. And the result of that is we now have some funds to be able to actually define the future of these pieces. These proposals that you're seeing here also then are lining up with what is coming through in the preliminary components of the strategic plan. A revitalization of the St. Paul campus, for example, is then clearly a focus of that is this sort of St. Paul Campus Center destination. And of course, as we revitalize that campus, that will have all kinds of feelings about interest in cohort and enrollment and retention and excellence of students and scholars who want to be on that. The dentistry clinical renovation, the provost and I actually toured our dentistry school this past week. Among our Big Ten peers, we are the last to have not updated our dentistry school. It is in need of that somewhat desperately. So that fits well into our planning and thinking and strategic planning around providing a health science workforce for the state. They need modern facilities to be able to do the simulation and dentistry work that they need to do for training. So.
Thank you. Yes, Regent Mohammed.
So hello, everyone. I just want to note that just the storytelling and the consolidation of what you're all seeing, really presenting here is really critical. I think just the landscape of how you're also telling the story of the importance of diversifying our economic landscape is really critical as well. And so just kudos to all the work that I think has been put here. And I think it's going to be really critical as we go into this next legislative session to really share this story with all the folks who really support the university, but also doing it in a way that's looking at the future forward vision of what's going to allow us to really preserve and sustain and really continue to be a resilient institution, right? But just wanted to note, great work here, and thank you for just putting this together for us.
Thank you. Regent Johnson.
Yeah, just a specific question here, I know about University of Minnesota Rochester, and I know in many aspects that falls under the Twin Cities campus for some of their, like accreditation and other things. I don't know. Their classes are, as you know, are greatly expanding in size, so the numbers of students are growing greatly, which is a wonderful thing. It's a good program. It's doing really well, but they've already been, at capacity or beyond right now. And is there provision in anything here, please?
And maybe I'll start, and then I'll maybe pass it over to Vice President Goldman. So we have the wonderful problem to have, which we all aspire to, which is that we have an 80% increase in enrollment in our Rochester campus. It is taking off, and they are doing wonderful things down there, and it's getting the recognition it deserves in terms of being a choice place to study health sciences in a academically rigorous and really creative learning environment. So, this proposal here is for what's on this year's capital component, but we are in many conversations, and VP Goldman was down in Rochester just this week and doing a lot of work. We are going to have to come up with a plan for how that goes. Some of that is capital investment, but some of it is not. And I don't know, VP Goldman, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Thank you, President Cunningham. I'm going to turn my video off because it's saying unstable just to make sure everybody can hear me. So I was down in Rochester last week with Chancellor Carroll, meeting with a number of local community members, along with the owners of buildings, the DMC related to funding, and also how we start to increase and strengthen our partnership with Mayo. Chancellor Carroll and I will be working to try by the end of the calendar year to really come up with a long-term plan for Rochester. And there's two approaches. We have the land there, and one approach is to try to build the campus, which for all the reasons that we've talked about and the budget struggles may not be the right approach. The other thing that I'm taking into extreme consideration with the support of President Cunningham is who's ever in these seats 30 years from now, the last thing we want to do is create yet more deferred maintenance maintenance burden on the system. So we're going to look at a couple of different approaches that we'll clearly come to the board with at the right time. For the housing and residential, we are going to be looking at some sort of public-private partnership. P3 is how they're called. Probably on the land that we own, that would have the dormitory, would have the facilities, food facilities, gym, and then probably the thinking is more of a leased approach in partnership with Mayo, the Discovery District down there, for the actual academic parts being more downtown. So Regent Johnson, certainly we're working diligently to try to come up with a plan, and with Chancellor Carroll's success down there, it only adds more urgency for us to try to get there.
Vice Chair Wheeler, Regent Johnson, just to put a finer point on it, we don't own any facilities currently in Rochester, and everything is leased for those who may not understand that. So there will not be any capital requests for Rochester at any point in time until we actually own facilities there. Working very closely with landlords for additional space so that we can accommodate that rapid growth there, but capital requests won't be an issue for us.
Thank you, appreciate that clarification. They're kind of bursting the seams,
They're,
but it's
right, so
literally
right,
not.
and just to be really clear, simply because it's not on the capital plan doesn't
Yeah,
mean
I
we
know.
are not planning for
Right.
their expansion. And I think there's actually a number of great options in which we can have expansion there. Again, using all the creativity of both P3 partnerships and lease space, and what we can do to make sure that campus continues to grow. They're close to hitting their they're close to their next top level goal in their multi-year plan, and we're going to work right alongside with them on that. Yeah.
Thank you all for responses, appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other discussion, questions? Okay, I will say that I'm really pleased with the reinvestment funds that are going to be set aside to give us some leveling of our capital investments required. So that was, I think, brilliant, and as President Cunningham said, really hard because it means that there's a trade-off for other choices in the budget as well, but very much needed. So appreciate that, and the clarity of what our priorities are, which I think, to Regent Farnsworth's point, will help us with the legislative, and Regent Mohammed's point, help us with the legislative requests too, because there's clarity about what we're using the funds for. So thank you for this, a good presentation. Again, this is just for a review. We'll act on this in October. So with that, and there being no further business before the board, this meeting is adjourned.